Recording started. Plan weekly. Looks like we have a fairly. Oh, actually, I have a team update. We'll start with that. We have a new front-end engineer starting on Monday. I believe it's Monday. Hold on, let me check the dates. Yes, Monday. I'll put more details in our channel, but excited to bring another front-end engineer on board. Maybe next week we'll go through the hiring plan, which I think is official now for the upcoming, for now this fiscal year. It's pretty high up there, but I don't know if you, Keenan, Mark, or Gabe know what the product hiring plan is, but I think we have a pretty good feel on the engineering side, so we can share that. We can share what the plans are next week.
I mean, the only thing I really know is that we're adding a group product manager for plan, but I don't know of any additional like line PM hires.
I can speak that a little bit. Yeah, so we've already hired the new group PM. They're starting, or he is starting in a week, I think, or so.
Like a week or two.
And then we have a rec for one more PM. And so I think the general plan, as it was outlined in the fiscal 21 bottoms up planning, we will split project management into and then backfill from an engineering and design standpoint up to like a full team. And then we'll have a dedicated group for boards. But I kind of, the way I'm thinking about it, it's sort of like a moot point, because I'm hoping within the next few weeks we can get our list of opportunities together and kind of start focusing on like the things that are the highest value across the entire stage. So more or less we'll have 4 product teams within, fully staffed product teams within the plan stage is the target for this year.
Cool. Exciting. Okay. If no one else has any team updates, big picture updates, discussion, we can move over to workflow and back to Gabe.
Yeah, so I just want to call this out to everybody. Is something that we're starting to use to help planning and prioritization, and it's a really sweet dashboard that Donald put together. Thank you for doing that, by the way. That highlights our overall stage level kind of throughput from not an MR standpoint, but like a weight completed standpoint. And so like one of the problems that we've run into historically has been overcommitting based on like, you know, what we think we'll be able to get done. So this is a more pragmatic way to approach it, where you can look at historical velocity over any given release, and then see how many weight were delivered in that, and then hopefully that should inform how much to commit to. So a good example, looking at this in the project management group, I can share my screen right quick too. Let me just do that so it's easy, so everybody's not open up. So like as you can see across the entire plan stage, we have historically been delivering about 97 weight the last few, pretty consistent there. But we have 371 open or like issues weight committed to 12.8. So like we're a good 280 over allocated there. Some of that is in the project management group. A large portion of it is, if you kind of notice, there's a ton of issues. So one of the things that we're going to be doing over the next week or two is resetting priorities with things and pushing anything that is like likely won't be completed within 12.8 based on our velocity out into the backlog probably, and then reprioritizing everything for 12.9. That way, like we're setting better expectations with stakeholders and what the wider community. And hopefully if we get that list of opportunities nailed down, we'll be able to then like prioritize against those instead of just like kind of randomly doing a bunch of stuff, which I sometimes feel like we do, because issue tracking and issues is like an interesting catch-all for like tons of different issues. So we're gonna have to figure out how to solve for that. But I just wanted to point this out to everybody, and this is separate from MR throughput, which is still an important thing to track, and I want to get that up and support the engineering effort there. So I think part of the solution to increasing, I guess, weight completed and also increasing MR throughput is breaking things down into smaller pieces, both from an issue and MR standpoint. So we're going to be focusing on that pretty heavily over the next several releases and start practicing it and getting better at doing so, just because I think it will de-risk everything and hopefully make it easier to parallelize work, as John Hope says. Any questions about that? Nope.
No, this is great. And you said this is new, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yep. You can thank Donald.
Thanks.
So next item, I think like we discussed, and I've discussed with the EMs and some PMs, the idea of like work in progress limits. And kind of what it boils down to is like, it seems contradictory to like being async first. And then like, you know, if you get blocked on something, pulling in something else to work on it so you get unblocked. But I guess like, I kind of want to just have a discussion around like, what are the underlying goals of using work in progress limits, and how can we leverage them not like to increase our throughput by removing bottlenecks and improving processes. So like, where are things getting, so like if you had work in progress limits and let's say they're 10 and you get blocked on something and there's not a slot for you to start another item, like what do you spend your time on? And I guess that's kind of like what we need to understand is like, where are the bottlenecks in our process? And then when you're blocked or you don't have time, like how can we deploy resources to fixing the process, changing the process, improving it so that the bottleneck gets removed? You know, it's almost like incremental improvement of process just as much as like incrementally shipping features and capabilities. So general discussion, I'd like to just see what our goals are and how we can like have a sane approach towards using work in progress limits, but then also improving our process as a part of that.
So I think a good first step to figuring this out is determining what our WIP limits will be, especially around like in dev and maybe one step before that. So ready in development. And we talked about it last week about trying to be ambitious, at least in the beginning, because then it might be easier to get meaningful data so that we can improve the process if we are ambitious. So taking that into account, aiming for one issue per engineer. What was it? One issue minus one per engineer. So it'll be hard to get to that right away. We can aim for that. I'm wondering if we should start with maybe, maybe just say one. So we have what? For project management, how many engineers total do we have? Got 4 front end, 10 total. So yeah, just having a WIP limit of 10 for in dev, or maybe for each column or each phase having a WIP limit of 10 for project management, just to start off, and then see what we can see what kind of data we can get from that, and if we may need to make adjustments, yeah, we can iterate off of that.
Is it possible right now to create a dashboard in Periscope that has the more or less the cycle time for the average cycle time for each stage? So how long does something sit and ready for development on average? How long does something sit and in dev on average? How something does sit and like blocked on average and in review? So it's like, it's just the average amount of time that each issue stays in that given state. Is that possible?
I wish, but no. At least I don't think it is, because we don't track when a label is added or changed. So we have no way of, because our workflows are within labels and not a first class, or whatever we call them, but not essentially a first class citizen there. There isn't. Unless like John,
we should add to the product itself.
No, I had to do this using command line scripts based off system notes. Like, it was really tricky when I was trying to figure out throughput things. Like, I don't think there's any way we track this at the minute. It would be nice to have, though.
Yeah, so as Gabe mentioned, like, one, that's something we should think about getting into the product in general, right? Like you look at any other tool that offers like teamwork boards, especially on the dev space, like that's a key metric, and it's usually bubbled up into like larger level reports at like program level views. But but I get what Donald's saying. Like since we're really just leaning on labels for them, and they're not first class objects, like it might be.
Yeah, I know there's issues, and there was a lot of discussion about a year ago about making workflow steps as making one primitive. I can look up those issues if you want to, because that was on us on project management. So I'll look to see if I can find those issues. There were a lot of videos and a lot of conversations around that, and maybe we should resurrect those conversations.
I think some of that stuff's being discussed in cycle analytics and customizable stages and whatnot. So I'll also look, because I know that's what I was expecting to be able to do from that. And I think that might be in beta or something, maybe on Canary. But I guess if we can't track that, that's fine. That's a goal to get to, because I think that's when you have, like when you're doing Kanban, like that's how you understand which cycle or which stage is the biggest bottleneck. So like if we were to see that things sit in dev for a long time, and like that's the longest out of all of the stages where something sits, then that's a good indicator that we need to like break issues down into smaller pieces so they can move through at a more rapid rate. And same thing, like if we notice that things like in review has the highest cycle time, then we get together as a team, we say, hey, like what is the thing that is preventing us from moving things to review quicker, and like find a constraint that's there that we think is the biggest one, and then fix the process. So like this could even extend like outside of our stage, for example. So like if waiting for a database maintainer to review an MR is the thing that is tripping all these up, then how can we get more database maintainers on our team or remove that constraint? And it's like the goal then becomes like not just delivering issues, but fixing the overall throughput of the system, and like by removing one constraint at a time so that everything starts moving faster for everyone. And I think it'll be hard to have like quantitative data to direct us to the largest constraint without seeing cycle times, but we could probably do a qualitative stab at it at some point. So just be thinking about that. The other thing I was going to say is like, we're in this case, like if we're going to start doing, a work in progress limit within the project management group of 10, there's 22 in progress right now. What happens when, like, how are we going to communicate out to the rest of the team? They move their issue from in dev into in review. What do they do then? We sort of have to like break the cycle of just going and picking up another issue and then going back in and pulling it into in dev. And we need to like direct them towards helping in other ways. And I guess that's where I would just like to ask for help and conversation around that.
Do you want to do this asynchronously in an issue and include all the engineers?
Absolutely. That's
so that everybody understands exactly like what's what the intention of WIP limits are, like you say, and what to do if the column is full, what to do if the column's over its WIP limit, but you still can't help with anything else, and so on.
Yep. Do you want me to draft that, or do you want to take a stab at it? I'm happy to if you would prefer I do it.
I don't mind. Yeah, I can do it. Like,
okay. John. Cool. I think that's good for now. Let's just get that discussion going because I don't want to not discuss it. The other thing kind of in that same line is there's two schools of thought with like how you manage projects, and you can like do the Scrum type thing where right now we do monthly releases, and that's too large of a time span to make commitments up front in a lot of ways because things change, evolve, you learn something once you get started. And so the way that teams deal with it is they'll have like week-long iterations where they like have a smaller chunk of work that they commit to and plan for a given like week. And then that lets them like reset their expectations, their commitments the next week based on what they learned in that week. And so it's just like a faster cycle time. That's one approach. It's more like I guess, sprinty, whatever. And then the other approach is like looking for continuous improvement via something like Kanban, where you look at cycle time, you use work in progress limits, you like look at lead times. And so we don't have data really for either, but we should support both in the product anyways. So I'm just more curious of like, which one do you like, are you leaning towards? Because I like Kanban a lot more, having done this for many, many years. Especially like a product that's the maturity of ours with the volume of like backlog. But I didn't know if you saw value in trying to do shorter iterations within the company's milestone, if that made sense.
Yeah, so I'm kind of the same way. I see value in go into one of these at least, as opposed to what we're currently doing with the month-long releases. Because the problem I see with month-long releases is that a lot of times we tend to kind of fill our, like for large feature requests, we'll fill, like a 5 will take the entire release just because that's kind of the time that we've associated with that large feature. So if we go to shorter iterations, I think we will just naturally become better at breaking things up into at least week-long MRs or week-long work. I do like Kanban, the Kanban approach also, and I'm kind of leaning more toward Kanban if we were to go over from either shorter iterations or Kanban. I don't know why, but just also the same way in past experience where Kanban has seemed to work. And when we've been trying this kind of hybrid approach that we're doing, it's just easier to, I think, plan. I think engineers have a little bit more of an opportunity to determine what they're working on through Kanban because it's just like they have a list of things that they can pick up. I just feel like it flows a little bit better, and it also kind of goes toward our there's just not as much planning that has to go into place as milestone planning would have to, even with shorter iterations. So I'm for trying to go all in on Kanban. But then we need to get rid of the whole concept of milestones, ideally. At least, I don't know, the hybrid approach that we're doing right now is hard, having milestones. And go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem. Is like having milestones would be easy to predict if we had lead time. So like within Kanban, those are the metrics used as cycle time, which is like how long something sits in a given process. And then you have lead time. So how long does something sit from once it's like quote unquote started until it is on production. And so if you know what the lead time is, you can even have lead time by issue weight size and like that kind of breakdown. I can look at everything that is in the like backlog and tell you when it will be done based on that, right? So it's how you set those expectations, and so that way we can know if we know our lead time, we can know when we prioritize something, what milestone it's going to fall in, theoretically, right? So you get the same level of predictability. It's just a different metric, and I think that's where like the milestone. Really, what it is a version. It's a software version. It's a release, and it's when something's going to get packaged into a release. And I think we can still do like kind of a kickoff and an overview of what we're targeting for a given version, but only if, like in any case, we know what like our lead time is, or we know what our velocity is, and we have some way to kind of predict that out. So I think that's why the metrics are really important. But and getting lead time would be incredibly valuable, I think, both in the product and for us as a whole. I'm gonna put a note for myself to follow up on customizable cycle analytics, because the way it was being designed, if I remember correctly, you could create your own report with your own stages on it, scoped to a group or project or a subset of like labels. So if that's there, that will give us cycle time, and then it also should give us theoretically lead time if it works the way that I was expecting it to work. So I'll follow up and see if that's ready yet. Anything else to discuss here? Oh, all right, Keenan, you got the next one.
Sorry. Caught me right after his sneeze. Yeah, so we were talking about this a little bit last night in Slack, and I think, John, we were hoping you could shed some light. Like, what's the DB review process? It feels like we get a lot of items kind of in the same way we were just talking about, stuck in that phase in review. And I realized I don't actually know what that process looks like, so I'm just trying to learn.
Yeah, sure. It's similar to the back end review process. Like you have, it happens asynchronously to the back end review process. So you typically have a back end reviewer, back end maintainer, database reviewer, database maintainer. There's also a database lab channel in Slack, which has a production replica of our database that allows people to run explain queries and that kind of thing, to do some kind of investigation before they submit an MR with the database change. Nevertheless, if there's a database change, and like say a migration, even sometimes when it doesn't alter the database itself, but it alters data in the database, it requires the database review. Anything that requires a database review has to go to the reviewer first, and then ultimately to a maintainer. I think up until Christmas, we had one maintainer, database maintainer. Now we have 3. Yeah, it's still not, like, it's still definitely a bottleneck, like across the company, like across the department. But it's better than it was. But yeah, so that's like the long story short, that's why you're seeing a bottleneck there. There just aren't enough database maintainers to do the final approval before an MR can be merged.
Does it typically work the same way with Roulette, in that we will assign it to a database reviewer and a database maintainer, or is it triggered by a label? Because I've seen the review or database review label. Do we still use that at all?
Yeah, so I think I think it is like, it is Roulette's definitely in there as an option, but I think the same as with regular backend reviews, you can choose to pick somebody with domain expertise. The labels are used for when the MR has been reviewed. So the MR requires review, there's a label for that. When it has been reviewed, there's a label for that. And when its final approval has happened, there's a label for that as well. But again, like most database changes are also going to have backend changes. So there's typically going to be both.
And do you guys have I don't know, do you have a process for keeping track of that stuff or escalating it if it sticks for a while? I'm just I'm trying to say, like, when you describe something like that, it's like essentially a bottleneck for a lot of value delivery across the board, right? With that, and it's great that we've got 3x more than we had at Christmas, so that's awesome. But like I don't know, I'm looking at that like adding the progress indications on the roadmap, and knowing that we have some customers waiting for that. Like, what do we do when something's stuck for a long time? And is there a flag we can raise, or how do we bubble it up to a point of discussion if something's been sitting for a while?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure of the workflow of people, of the maintainers, like, and how they keep track of all this stuff. I know that from our end, like, we've been trying various things. One of them is to sort of, if the database work is like well defined and known in advance, we'll try and ship the database work first, get it into the review process as early as possible. But you can't always do that because the database works informed by the way you create a model or something like that. Like, so it might change, and you don't want to sort of saddle yourself with like bad naming because get the database table created. Yeah. So the things we've done on our end to try and mitigate the fact that it takes longer. We also, like, I believe, like, we have quite a few people in training. I don't know how many. I haven't seen the list of issues, but yeah, I don't know of any process other than simply tagging somebody else if you're really eager to get it through and one person's slammed with reviews to do.
I appreciate that. That's helpful.
Yeah, so we do have on our engineering metrics dashboard, we have a number for I don't remember what the metric is. actually called, but time for when it goes, like the creation of an MR to when it's actually merged in. Um, are we tracking, like, is that an actual KPI that we are trying to improve upon, John?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's one of the three back-end KPIs. Yeah, it's called mean time to merge. But there can be like multiple reasons why that would go up or down. Like database review being involved is definitely, I would imagine, like one of the big factors. But then the number of different disciplines involved in the MR, like, so if there's documentation or some front end work and some back end work and some database work, like that's going to be the main contributing factor to how long it takes, how complex the work is, how well defined it is in advance of actually being done. Definitely want to try to make sure that things are better defined, like before we start working on them. There's been a couple of things, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I could go digging, where the MR has stayed in progress for a long time, and conversation has happened on the MR about what's the best way to actually implement the thing, and like that's probably better done during planning breakdown. It's not always possible, but it should ideally be done there.
And does that start before, like right when it's created, or when it switches from like a work in progress MR to an official MR, or when it's assigned to someone? Like what kicks off that mean time to merge? Remember?
Honestly, I think it's literally a subtraction of the time the MR was created from the time the MR was merged. That's why I think, like, if you have very occasionally we have very, very long running MRs, which maybe the work was started but it wasn't necessary at that time and it gets put on the back burner. And I think, like, the person then picks that up, a couple of months later, works on it, and immediately it pops up in the figures, like, this took 3 months, so obviously, like, skews the figures heavily. So I assume it's just like a subtraction, a straightforward subtraction, like the two numbers. But yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll look into that a little bit more. I'm talking with Tim today, so I'll talk through that a little bit with him today. So on the engineering side, we've got SLAs for both review and maintainer on 2 days. Do we have an SLA on database review? Do you know?
What was that last bit? Sorry, you have an SLA on what?
On database review, even though there's not that many like database maintainers, is the expectation, like, once it's assigned to them, to get
it done
back?
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know. I could go dig in for that and find out. Actually,
I'd be interested to know and if it's being tracked in any way, because that might help indicate the problem space that we can try to help solve.
Sure thing. We also have a universal, what's it called? Universal engineering team KPI board on Periscope, which you might find interesting. So I'll put that in the agenda. It has our MR breakdowns by category. It has our mean time to merge and our throughput. So it's typically interesting for engineering managers, I guess, but might be interesting to other people as well.
Cool. Okay. Anything else around database review? Move on. All right. Anything else? And sorry, is it Marcin?
Hi. So this is the purpose of it too, to teach you my name. I'm Marcin, like Chin. And even though I introduced myself in the Slack channel where Russell pinged me as well, I wanted to use this opportunity that I'm here looking at your faces live for the first time. So yeah, I'm gonna be for 12.8. I'm gonna be the trainee tech writer. You got the spiel from Russell. Just ping me when you're pinging him. And I'm gonna take over in 12.9. So I'm still learning. So I'm learning the product. I want to learn the stage specifically. So I've sent some coffee chat requests. Some of the people are gonna get them to It's me.
Welcome.
And where are you at? Marcin?
I'm in Warsaw, Poland.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, that is the last thing on the agenda, unless anyone else has.
I had one more comment. I couldn't unmute fast enough. Sorry. When we're doing like retros at the end of our cycles, are we flagging like, hey, I'm stuck in database review or this area for each issue, or is that something we could do just to grab some info per cycle until we have some more like actual analytics?
Yeah, so that's a good point. In the past, we've done kind of one-off retros for issues that have spanned over multiple, or essentially slipped multiple milestones. It might be helpful to, and we also have our retro, our team retro, and then we have the company retro. It might be helpful. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. Or would it be helpful to have that information maybe in our retro? Like once something is delivered, start talking through, what essentially, yeah, having a retro on a single issue, or maybe we should continue having the one-off retros. I don't know. What do you all think?
Well, maybe the other side of that is like, how can we be proactive about it instead of reactive? Like, I don't know. Can we flag it earlier? I don't know. Even if it's just for communication purposes, like I think it's helpful if we're all like, oh, hey, we're half of the items we have are blocked because of this right now. Trying to spitball here. Maybe some processes we could do to at least just communicate states of multiple items.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know, just maybe being better. So yeah, there's the retro looking kind of past, after, reactive. But then beforehand, maybe if we can be better at updating statuses within issues, saying that, if something is extending for longer than initially thought, it may, just having a quick update in the issue saying this is where we're at.
Yeah, it could be a good start, I think, because that's also, I think, be super helpful for us to be able to get a quick view of where something's at, so we can communicate it and set expectations elsewhere.
Cool. Anything else? Alrighty. Well, thanks everyone. Have a good week and see you in another meeting.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you.